Hello and welcome, Stallion Slaughter here. I'd like to show you how I make metal in Ableton Live 9 Lite. A few years ago I got a Focusrite Scarlett 2i2 and it came with Ableton, and that is strictly the reason why I use Ableton over any other DAW. I've never used Cubase or Reaper or Pro Tools. I've used Fruity Loops, but it's absolute shit when you're trying to make metal. Like if you're not making EDM, then Fruity Loops is crap. So I use this DAW because it came with the interface and I'm broke as shit. You could probably infer that I use all free plugins because I'm also broke as fuck. Like that's just my life. I want to note that I have zero academic knowledge of how to mix and master music. Everything that I know is exclusively empirical, and that's from like turning knobs and flipping switches, and so that's basically how I know what I know. And I want to make this video for two reasons. For people that were in the same boat that I was, that they got this DAW and they got this interface and they have all their shit figured out, but they don't know what they're fucking doing, I want to help those people get a jump start. And the other reason is if you are experienced with mixing music and I'm doing something that's totally 100% wrong, it would be good to know. So if you're experienced, I would really enjoy the help. So the first thing I start with is drums. I'll have my song mostly written, but it doesn't really get cemented until I program the drums. And as you can see, I have it separated out into 4 different tracks. I mean, it's technically 6, but it's also technically 4 tracks because I have 2 snares and 2 bass drums. And I'll get to that in a minute. Now, you just right-click, hit Insert MIDI Track onto a deal there, and then right click, insert MIDI clip, and then you can highlight it or copy it, and you can paste it into your DAW here. And now obviously there's no, as you can see, there's nothing there, but to make a drum track you just hit drums, and then you have all these drum racks that you could choose from. A good starter kit for metal is the Session Dry. That's the one I liked the most. And if there's any parts of the drum kit that you don't particularly like that bass drum, I'm not really crazy about it, so like I can switch it out for something else. I don't think I use the Remo anymore. I use the British one or whatever the fuck it's called. But anyway, once you have that in there, you can double click to open your MIDI interface deal, and then you can create a drum track. You just double click and put your shit in there. It takes like 2 seconds. Oh, I'm a solo. And what's super superior to Fruity Loops, instead of having to go back to that other screen and make a whole new drum beat, you can just copy and paste and take out the symbol there, and then I just copy and paste all the way down until editing each one until I've got the whole completed programmed drum track. And so then I highlight the whole thing, consolidate, and I can copy and paste it into all of the different deals. Or if you want to save this MIDI, you just right click, hit export MIDI clip, and then, you know, like I don't know, drums, because we're edgy, yeah. And then you can go to your file explorer and you can drag it and drop it in there, and then you got your little dealioid there. So once that's all said and done, I don't need that anymore. You've got 6 different tracks or 8 different tracks, however way you want to split it up. And how to split it up is you just duplicate the track. So like if I wanted to make a snare, you just hit Control D and it will duplicate the track with all of your effects and everything. And then like if I just want to do just the snare on this track, then I mute everything that's not a snare. And then same thing with cymbals, toms, and the bass drum. So once I have all that separated out, I can start EQing. And then so for the snare, I use a parallel EQ. I think that's super important when you're making metal drums. You want a snare drum that just fucking pops out there. And so I've got a snare drum here, and then I got a snare amp. And now the amp part is made with a compressor and then a gate. And so it cuts off the sound. And so you end up with just this, as opposed to this. You run both at the same time. It's the same sound, but because it's parallel EQ'd, like, it's not a huge audible difference while you're not listening in the mix, but it really makes the snare pop out in the mix. And it's the same thing with the bass drum, but I isolate the low end to give this more punch, and it really pops through the mix a lot better. Be sure to add reverb to this part of the drum kit. And reverb is really good because it makes it sound real. It makes it sound like you're not fucking cheating by programming drums. But then you just export the audio into wherever. You know, like if you want to make your drum track, you just title it and then you put it in your file explorer, just like with the MIDI thing. And once you render out two audios, you got your upper kit and then just the bass drum. So you'll have two audio tracks. So when you go into your main thing, however long this fucking takes, oh my god! There we go. And then you got two audio tracks. I further processed the bass drum to try to make it a little bit brighter. And then you got your drum track. You got it consolidated down into two tracks, something that's highly modulatable. You can EQ them separately if you want to further process them, or you can level them differently, which is also really important, and so on and so forth. You got your drums all figured out. So I hope that was helpful. Okay, so once you got your drums programmed, you can start recording guitar. So when you're recording guitar, you want to record it twice. You want one going through the left speaker and one going through the right speaker. You want two separate independent guitar tracks, because to get this nice fat sound, you have to record it twice, because if you try to like copy and paste it like this, you get a fucking narrow shit sound. So then you got, that's how you do it. You record it twice. It's also kind of difficult when you're recording without any effects. That's super fucking important. You want a completely direct input. You don't want any other signal going on, because I've recorded with a pedal and I've recorded with an amp. And the problem is that once you nail the fucking take and then you're putting it together in the mix, if it's too bright or it's too warm and you can't fix it with an EQ, you have to go back and you have to re-record it twice again, and fuck all that noise. You just want to nail it the first time. So do a direct input. Don't do any effects whatsoever. If you don't like this sound, then get the fuck out of here. You're just going to have to get used to it. So once you get it all recorded, then you can start adding digital effects. The first thing you want to add is a gate. I don't know if you could hear that buzz because it's kind of quiet right now, but and you got fret noise and all that crap. Alleviate yourself of that stress of having to go through here and fucking delete all the silence. You can just put a gate on there. I mean, Jesus fucking Christ, it's not that hard. God damn. Anyway, so put the gate first, and then your pedal effects, and then your amp sim, your cabinet, like impulse loader, and then you need your EQs. Oh, I skipped one, didn't I? You need your EQs. So how I do this is I don't want to. Okay, you know what? We're gonna fucking Quentin Tarantino this shit. So work backwards from here. You got your reverb last. Now the reverb makes it sound like it was recorded in a tiny little room. You know, you want to replicate the sound of it coming out of an amp. And so then, you know, so you add a little bit of reverb, mostly dry. I like a bright room, you know, about half and half on the pre-filter, and you want it in a small room, you know, because if you put too much reverb, then it's just going to be a bunch of fucking noise. What did I have this at 25, I think? Anyway, so then you add your EQs. This is the first, the second EQ, and all this does is cut out any frequencies above 10,000 and below 100, because it's not like that's really the bands that I wanted in. I don't want anything to be processed by the compressor later that is outside of that range, and then I scoop out the mids a little bit to make it sound ultra fucking tasty. And then you got I have this more specific EQ, like just ever so slightly boosting the high end, so I get a brighter guitar because I like a bright tone. And then there's this little dip here, and that dip was basically to cut out too much frequency that was coming out at about 4,000 hertz. And that was really just kind of fucking with it super bad. And you just have to basically get in there and try to fuck with it. And how I did that was I just basically had this, and I went around at the top of the band with this crazy boosted things, and when I came up with a sound that I didn't like at about 4,000, then I brought it down, and then I just kept bringing it down until I couldn't hear it anymore. I don't really know where that was at to begin with, but it's somewhere in there. And then you got the low band, and like this was another thing where I sweeped it around. I was having a huge problem with the low end on the distortion, where it was going like whenever I was palm muting and shit. So I cut those out with that EQ there. Then you got your cabinet, like impulse loader. Impulses are like the shit, incredibly 100% necessary. I also level my track from here instead of on the mixer board here, because I don't want to fuck with the input signal. Like this is before any of that. So you want your input signal to be as clean and as clear as possible. So you don't want to lower the volume here. You want to lower the volume as late as possible. So I level it here, and then I have two impulses, one at 75% left and one at 100% left, so it's only coming out of the left speaker. And I just do the exact same thing but on the right side. So then you got your amp sim. Like as you can see, I like a bright guitar. I like the mids scooped out, a little bit of high-end bass. Like I really like that sub bass, but then there was some mid-range bass at like, it was at about 400 to 500 hertz, so it was just wobbling too much. It was just like too whoop, whoop, whoop. And so I cut that shit out. And then you got your distortion pedal. Now, like when it comes to distortion pedals, when you're talking free digital distortion, the TSC 808, there really is no other one that is better. This is really where it's at. So then that's how you end up with the final sound. So that's guitars. I did not even use impulses or amp sims for like the whole first year that I was doing music, because I didn't know they fucking existed, and it has changed my life. It should be noted that I use two separate amp sims and pedals for a clean signal. So I'll go ahead and run this mono, and then solo this. So like if I want a clean sound, So these are two separate things, and it's on a separate channel. Anyway, that is guitar. That is basically how I do that shit. Hopefully that was helpful. Again, I don't know, fuck it. Okay, so now we're on to bass guitar. And bass guitar is just about a lot of the same when it comes to regular guitar, where it's going to be the same thing, where you have a gate to begin with, and you want to make the gate a lot less strict than on the regular guitar, because you don't want it to cut off too much of the note. But then I have an EQ right up front to cut out frequencies that I don't want right out front, as opposed to the guitar. Then the pedal effects, amp sim, cabinet loader. It's got different impulses, but I use the same cabinet loader. Now on the bass guitar, I think it sounds fucking cool when I delay the second side, so it gives it the effect that it is double tracked, but it's like a different sound. It's not the same as a double tracked guitar. So I like that delay. That's probably not okay, but I think it sounds cool, so suck it. Then I like to compress the shit out of my bass guitar. I want it to be basically at all the same level of volume. There's certain notes on a bass guitar, like these high notes will shine out and like really come through the mix a lot softer, and you can kind of pick it up a little bit better, but it won't be at the same intensity as these low notes. As you can see in the wave itself, it's kind of thin here, and then it gets fat as shit. It just, like, you know, Leia, Jabba the Hutt, you know, like, and to make it sound better, I compress it to where they're both about the same. Jabba the Hutt and Leia are totally not the same at all, but you get the idea. Anyway, then I do the same EQ, because I've run it through all of this processing, so I want to cut out those frequencies again, because like the impulse loader will kind of add some low end and some other shit going on, mainly here. I've got this drive kind of low. I really like a distorted bass, so I'm gonna go ahead and turn that one up. Yeah, I like that growl. It's fucking awesome. Then the second EQ is more of the same. Like, there was a weird, like, clicking type of sound coming out whenever I would play here. Yeah, it comes out right there, and I can't really. I've tried everything, and I can't do anything about it except unless I wanted to, like, retake that track and roll the dice again to see if it would come back. But when I disable that track, you can pretty much hear it every time, right there. And that really came out through the mix. And so what I did was I isolated that frequency. I found it by using that little scroll around thing, and then I just dropped that all the way down to an infinite gain. And so then so I was able to, you know, do away with that shit. I also way upped this part because I really like a bright bass. I want the upper end to really come out through the mix. I want you to be able to critically listen and be able to hear the bass independently from the guitar. And then last but not least, just like on regular guitar, I added a little bit of reverb. It's a little more dry, and it's a smaller room and a little more bright, because you know, obviously I want the higher end to come out a little bit more, but I didn't want as much reverb going on in the bass because I've already got a delay running on it, so I didn't want it to fuck it up even more and hurt the accuracy, because I really suck ass at bass guitar. So that's bass guitar. It's more the same as regular guitar, except I've got a compressor and my high shelf, low shelf right out in the beginning. I don't know that little. I know that part on the bass guitar is a fucking mess, but it's just like good enough. Because oh my god, like that's my whole life on bass guitar. It just sucks so much ass. Anyway, so that's bass guitar. I hope you are liking what you got so far. I hope I've been very informative. Okay, so last thing that I record is the vocals. Now, the vocals, I EQ them to be pretty bright, so it'll come out as clear as possible, but I also want the high end restrained at about 9,000 hertz because I don't want the S's to come out like way too powerful and end up with that like horrible sound in your ear. I also don't use reverb because you definitely don't want completely dry vocals going on unless it's like a particular thing, like an effect that you're using, but you definitely want some kind of reverb going on in the vocals. And I don't use reverb anymore. I use delays. I think delays sound way cleaner because, and this is going to be a little too wet, but the delay will disappear into the mix pretty quickly, but it will be just enough and not as soon after a word that it will make the accuracy less. While it's playing by itself, it sounds fucking horrendous, like messy as shit. You cannot rain for the sparkle in her beautiful purple princess bottle. You know, it sounds terrible, but whenever you're playing it with the guitars and the drums, it disappears into the mix quite quickly. I don't want to force her to take part in my fantasy, but I get the feeling that she knows her purpose losing me. And then when we get onto the mastering chain later, you'll see that it almost completely disappears, and it's just very subtle, and it works out very well. That's basically it. I compressed the absolute shit out of it because I want all of this. As you can see, there's quite a range on it. I want it all to come out at the exact same volume, or at least pretty close to it. Now, the dynamic isn't necessarily as important. Like having dynamic, that is not as important on backup vocals. So I end up not compressing it quite as much, still a lot, and then I EQ it a lot less bright because I don't want these backup vocals to come out as clear. I just kind of want them to aid the lead but not take away from them at all, which is the same reason that I use reverb, because it kind of muddies it up a little bit and it makes it super reliant on the lead vocals. Now I make on leveling, I put the vocals, like the backup vocals, way behind the mix to where you can just barely hear them over the guitars playing. Oh my god, I have them disabled. But with the lead vocals going on, it's much more present. How can she be existent tonight into me? I will make her my fantasy. So there you go. That's the vocals for you. I mean, it's pretty simple. I don't really do a whole lot with vocals. Other than that, vocals are pretty straightforward. Yeah. Okay, so last thing, after we've recorded all your parts and you've got them all mixed together as best as you possibly can, like this mix has to sound the best that you can make it before you move on to the mastering chain, because there is no like shit mix gold out master. Like, that doesn't happen. This has to sound good for this to sound good. This is not some magic bullshit going on here. This is just like compression, and it's supposed to bring out and make everything sound the best that it can after you've made it sound the best that it can, if that makes any fucking sense. But trust me, that's basically it. Now, whenever you're running the song from start to finish, you have to listen to the whole song from start to finish before you do anything on the mastering chain. How because you want this number right over here to stay at about -5, -6. This will get up to about -6 somewhere throughout the song, but you want this to stay at about -6 to -5, somewhere in there, to leave yourself enough headroom so when you start compressing the track, then it won't clip. Now the first thing I do, I'm going to put a warning out there right now. I'm going to start compressing this track. Like, these are compressors, so it's going to get loud. Just a warning, volume there, or volume warning, whatever the fuck. So the first thing I do is I run it through another EQ, and all this is a band, or like a shelf filter. So, and I scoop out the mids a little bit more because, you know, the guitars kind of sound a little bit warm even at this stage. So when you activate that, it cuts out everything below 45 hertz, and that's like a lot of drums, vocals, maybe a little bit on the bass, but not so much guitar. But, you know, there's things that are going through there but that I don't want processed by the compressor that will essentially screw with whatever you're, and you can't even like hear past these frequencies of like 20,000 and 45, and so you cut those out so you're not having things that you're not hearing fuck with the sound that you're trying to process. So I cut those out, and then I cut out a little more of the mid-range frequencies, just to make it sound cool. Then I compress the track a little bit. Probably, you know, this is a lot actually, to bring up the volume, to make the quiet things, like the guitars here are resting pretty much on top of the mix. This will bring the guitars level with everything else. Actually, it's the other way around. Like, it'll bring the guitars up to where the drums are at, and then the bass guitar right in line with the guitars, and so on and so forth. You want all of this stuff, and then the vocals will be set right on top, just like sitting right on top of the mix, so they'll come out nice and clear, but everything will be as loud as it can possibly be, which is the way I like my metal. Then the last thing I do is this domestic plugin from Ableton that is a full chain master, and that provides a stereo enhancement to make the guitars stand out on either side of the vocals and the bass and everything. It'll make it all more wide, so like the backup vocals aren't buried under the lead vocals like at all. And I like the way it sounds, and I don't really know why, but you know, I just kind of do it. And then the mid-range, I scoop out a little bit more, just because that's the way I fucking do things around here. And I've got like 20 EQs with no mids going on. But anyway, let's give this a listen, and it's going to be quite a bit louder than -7 dB. It'll probably jump up all the way to like 0.3.
How can she be existing tonight into me? I wanna pay her human fantasy. How can she be existing tonight?
No, 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 no. Anyway, so that's the mastering chain there. So basically from there I work my way backwards. Like, I'll end up here and I think it sounds great, but maybe the compression brought out some leveling issues. Like, I think originally I had this set at like -8 decibels, so it was like when I got it all compressed, it was like way fucking louder than everything else. And so I brought it down while the mastering chain was on, and I made little tweaks here and there, and I go all the way back through to the drums, and then I work my way back up again, and I do that as many times as I need it to make it sound as good as I can possibly make it. And then I release it on YouTube. I listen to it for like a week, decide that I did something wrong, I fucking hate it, start a new project, and go through this whole thing over again, just punishing myself by, you know, trying to live up to a professional standard with cheap ass equipment. So that's how I make metal in Ableton. I hope this was helpful to beginners, and then I hope that people who have been listening for a while that know what they're doing haven't lost all and any respect for me.